The mist clung to the cemetery like a shroud, weaving between weathered headstones as Martin leaned on his shovel. For 15 years, he prepared final resting places, witnessing grief in all its forms. But these flowers, pristine bouquets appearing every Thursday on plot 237, they troubled him. No mourners, no ceremony, just silent offerings with blank cards. Today was different. A card had slipped, revealing a partial name from the same initial as the deceased. Martin's spine tingled as he watched the florist's retreating figure disappear into the fog. Don't forget to subscribe to hear what Martin discovers as he unearths secrets buried deeper than the graves he tends. Martin had never intended to become a gravedigger. 15 years ago, he'd been a promising architectural student with dreams of building structures that would outlive him. Then came the accident, his sister's car, the icy bridge, the funeral he couldn't afford. The cemetery owner had offered him work in temporary housing in the groundskeeper's cottage. Temporary had become permanent. The cottage walls were lined with architectural drawings he'd never submitted, dreams suspended like the mist that now surrounded him. Martin's colleagues at the cemetery were few, mostly groundskeepers who arrived after he'd finished his solitary morning work. He preferred it that way. The dead made no demands, asked no questions about his past. His sister's death had left a wound that never properly healed. He'd been arguing with her on the phone when it happened, a trivial dispute about their mother's care. The last words had been cut short by screeching tires and shattering glass. The guilt had hollowed him out, leaving a man who found more comfort among tombstones than in the company of the living. Martin's simple goal each day was to provide dignity in death that sometimes eluded people in life. He took pride in perfectly squared corners of graves, in level ground that wouldn't sink with the seasons. It was his quiet atonement. The cemetery director, Richard Blackwood, found Martin's attentiveness to the graves peculiar, even disturbing. A businessman who viewed the cemetery as an investment rather than a sacred trust, Blackwood had repeatedly tried to modernize operations to make Martin's work more efficient. Still playing in the dirt like a child, Martin? Blackwood's voice cut through the morning stillness as he approached with two board members. Our gravedigger fancies himself quite the detective lately, obsessing over flowers on old graves instead of preparing the new plots I assigned. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Perhaps we should consider automated equipment, Blackwood continued, checking his gold watch. Seems our manual labor has too much time for amateur sleuthing. The humiliation burned in Martin's chest as he clutched the card with its partial signature. Blackwood couldn't understand that some mysteries demanded resolution, especially when they appeared every Thursday on the grave of Amanda Blackwood, the director's wife, dead these 5 years. Martin nodded silently as Blackwood and the board members walked away, their expensive shoes leaving shallow imprints in the damp soil. He tucked the card into his pocket and returned to his work, methodically preparing a new grave for tomorrow's funeral. The rhythm of the shovel striking earth usually calmed him, but today his thoughts kept returning to that partial signature. Later that afternoon, Martin was carefully arranging his tools in the maintenance shed when Blackwood appeared in the doorway, his imposing silhouette blocking the light. "I've been reviewing the cemetery records," Blackwood said, his voice carrying the practiced smoothness of someone accustomed to delivering unpleasant news. "Your productivity has dropped 15% in the last month. Care to explain?" Martin wiped his hands on his worn work pants. "I've been ensuring the grounds meet proper standards. Some of the older sections needed attention. Older sections like my wife's plot?" Blackwood stepped closer, his cologne overwhelming the earthy scents of the shed. "The groundskeepers handle maintenance. You dig. That's all you're qualified to do." "I was just overstepping," Blackwood interrupted, dropping a folder on Martin's workbench. "I've drafted a new schedule. You'll report your completed tasks hourly. Any deviation requires my approval." Martin stared at the micromanaged timetable, each hour of his day now dictated by the man who couldn't be bothered to visit his wife's grave. The following Thursday, Martin arrived earlier than usual, positioning himself behind the large oak that overlooked plot 237. The morning fog was just lifting when he spotted the florist approaching with a familiar bouquet. He was about to step forward when a hand gripped his shoulder. "Spying now, are we?" Blackwood's voice was ice cold. "I warned the board about your obsessive behavior." The florist, startled by their presence, hurriedly placed the flowers and retreated without a word. "Sir, I just wanted to." "To what? Harass our vendors? Invade my privacy?" Blackwood's face reddened. "My wife's grave is not your concern." Two security guards appeared behind Blackwood. Martin recognized them from the funeral home that worked exclusively with the cemetery. These gentlemen will escort you to clear out your cottage. You're suspended pending review. Blackwood straightened his tie. The board meeting is tomorrow. I've recommended termination. Martin felt the ground shift beneath him. The cottage was his only home. The cemetery his only purpose for 15 years. The final humiliation came the next day. Martin stood before the cemetery board in his only suit, threadbare at the elbows, as Blackwood presented a slideshow titled Modernization Initiative. As you can see, Blackwood gestured to a graph. Mechanical excavation reduces costs by 60%. Martin's position is obsolete. And what about the personal touch our families appreciate? Asked an elderly board member. Blackwood smiled thinly. Sentiment doesn't pay bills, Margaret. Besides, our gravedigger has become a liability. Stalking behavior, unhealthy fixations. Martin's hands trembled as he finally spoke. May I address the board? Blackwood waved dismissively. If you must. Martin reached into his worn leather satchel and removed a leather-bound notebook. I've maintained detailed records of every grave I've dug. Soil conditions, drainage patterns, subsidence risks. He opened the book, revealing meticulous architectural drawings and engineering notes. My architectural training helped me identify serious structural issues in the north section retaining wall. It's compromising at least 30 grave sites. The board members leaned forward, suddenly interested. I've also documented every visitor to every grave for 15 years, Martin continued quietly, including those who come when they think no one is watching. His eyes met Blackwood's, and for the first time, he saw fear flash across the director's face. From the back of the room, Eleanor Blackwood, the cemetery's largest benefactor, cleared her throat. I'd like to see those records, Mr. Martin. Her silver hair caught the light as she fixed her gaze on her nephew, the director. All of them. The boardroom fell into a tense silence as Eleanor Blackwood's request hung in the air. Martin clutched his leather-bound notebook, feeling its familiar weight. 15 years of observations, sketches, and secrets. Those records are cemetery property, Director Blackwood interjected, his voice strained, and likely filled with the delusional scribblings of a man who talks to the dead more than the living. Eleanor raised a silver eyebrow. Then you shouldn't mind us reviewing them, Richard. Martin opened his notebook to a specific page. May 17th, 3 years ago. That's when the weekly bouquets began appearing on Mrs. Blackwood's grave. Always Thursday mornings, always before official opening hours. Richard Blackwood's face flushed. This is precisely the obsessive behavior I mentioned. I notice things, Martin continued quietly. It's what I do. I notice that the flowers come from Hartley's florist on Maple Street. I notice there are always white lilies with sprigs of rosemary, remembrance. And I notice that while the cards never bear a sender's name, they're always written in the same hand. He turned to another page in his notebook. 2 months ago, the wind caught one of these cards. I found it tangled in the juniper bush by the eastern path. Martin removed a small, weather-worn card from between the pages and placed it on the table. The message reads, "Forever in my heart." But when I held it to the light, Martin reached into his satchel and produced a small UV pen light. When he shone it on the card, previously invisible writing appeared in the corner. Love E. Eleanor Blackwood's sharp intake of breath was audible throughout the room. E for Eleanor? Asked Margaret, the elderly board member. Or E for Elizabeth, Martin said softly. Mrs. Blackwood's sister. Richard Blackwood stood abruptly. This is absurd. You're fabricating. Elizabeth Harmon, Martin continued, who, according to cemetery records, was barred from attending her sister's funeral by the bereaved husband. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. I've worked here 15 years, Martin said. I've watched people grieve. I've seen family feuds play out over open graves. But I've never seen someone try so hard to control who mourns. Martin turned to another page in his notebook. The retaining wall issue I mentioned isn't just structural. Last spring's heavy rains caused minor shifting in the north section. Lot 237, Mrs. Blackwood's grave, showed signs of water damage. I documented it and submitted a maintenance request. He slid a carbon copy of the form across the table. Mr. Blackwood denied the request, stating budget constraints. Yet the following week, he approved renovations to the administrative building. New marble countertops for the reception area. Richard Blackwood's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. You're overstepping, Martin. Am I? Martin opened his notebook to another page. October 12th last year. You visited your wife's grave for the first and only time since her funeral. You stayed for precisely 3 minutes and 47 seconds. You made a phone call, paced in circles, and left without placing flowers or speaking a word to her. You were spying on me? Blackwood's voice rose dangerously. I was trimming the hedge by the Donovan mausoleum, Martin replied calmly. But yes, I noticed. Just as I noticed when you met with developers in your office last month to discuss land utilization opportunities for the north section, including the plot where your wife rests. A collective gasp rippled through the board members. That's a lie, Blackwood sputtered, but his eyes darted nervously. Is it? Martin removed a small digital recorder from his pocket. The groundskeeper's cottage has thin walls. Your voice carries when you're angry on the phone. He pressed play, and Richard Blackwood's voice filled the room. Once we clear the regulatory hurdles, we can begin relocating the older plots. No one visits those graves anymore. It's wasted space. Martin stopped the recording. This was taken the day after you denied my maintenance request for the north section. Eleanor Blackwood rose slowly from her seat, her elegant frame rigid with barely contained fury. Richard, is this true? You're planning to develop the section where my niece is buried. It's not. It's being taken out of context, Blackwood stammered. The cemetery needs revenue streams to remain viable. What it needs, Eleanor said coldly, is integrity. Martin closed his notebook. I don't claim to understand the complexities of your family relationships, but I do understand this cemetery. Every inch of soil, every tree, every stone. And I understand the people who come here to grieve. He looked directly at Richard Blackwood, including Elizabeth Harmon, who for 3 years has been bringing flowers to her sister because you wouldn't allow her to say goodbye properly. The boardroom door opened, and a slender woman with graying auburn hair stepped hesitantly inside. Martin recognized her immediately from her Thursday visits, though they had never spoken. Elizabeth, Eleanor breathed, rising to embrace the newcomer. I'm sorry to interrupt, Elizabeth said softly. The receptionist told me there was a board meeting about. Her eyes found Martin. About the Gravedigger. Mrs. Harmon, Martin acknowledged with a slight nod. You know each other, Richard demanded. Elizabeth shook her head. Not formally, but he's always been kind enough to look away when I visit Catherine. He pretends not to see me, gives me privacy. Her voice hardened as she turned to Richard. Unlike you, who made sure I couldn't even attend my own sister's funeral. Catherine didn't want you there, Richard snapped. After what you did, after what you told her I did, Elizabeth corrected quietly. We reconciled, Richard. In the hospital before she died. She asked me to look after you, believe it or not. A sad smile crossed her face. I've been trying to honor that request from a distance, checking on her grave since you never seemed to. Eleanor placed a protective arm around Elizabeth's shoulders. I think we've heard enough. I move that we dismiss these ridiculous allegations against Mr. Martin and instead form a committee to investigate the proposed development plans for the north section. Seconded, Margaret said firmly. Richard Blackwood looked around the room, suddenly aware he had lost control of the narrative. This is all a misunderstanding. Martin has clearly fabricated. The board will review all evidence, Eleanor interrupted, including Mr. Martin's notebooks and your development proposals. Until then, I suggest we reinstate our Gravedigger to his position and his home. The vote was quick and decisive. Martin would keep his job. A special committee would investigate the development plans, and Richard Blackwood was placed on administrative leave pending review. As the meeting adjourned, Eleanor approached Martin. My driver will help you move back into your cottage this afternoon, she said quietly. And I'd appreciate if you'd show me and Elizabeth those structural issues in the north section tomorrow. Martin nodded. Of course, Mrs. Blackwood. Eleanor, please. She glanced at his notebook. You've been watching over my niece all these years. I think we can dispense with formalities. After the others had left, Elizabeth Harmon lingered. Thank you, she said simply, for noticing, for caring. Martin looked down at his weathered hands. It's my job to care for this place, for everyone in it. Even those of us still above ground, she asked with a gentle smile. Especially those, Martin replied. The dead are at peace. It's the living who need the most tending. As he walked back to his cottage that evening, Martin felt a strange lightness. The cemetery path seemed more welcoming than ever, the ancient trees standing sentinel as they always had. He had protected this place, as it had protected him for 15 years. In the distance, he noticed a fresh bouquet on Catherine Blackwood's grave, white lilies and rosemary. But this time, the card was signed openly, with love, Elizabeth. Martin smiled and continued toward home, his notebook of secrets tucked safely under his arm. What about you? Have you ever stood up for something important using an unexpected skill? Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your stories of quiet courage. The next morning, Martin found an envelope slipped under his door. Inside, photographs of him digging at night in the north section and a note. I know what you buried there. Meet me where Blackwood learns everything about 1998. Martin stared at the photographs, his hands trembling. The grainy images showed him digging in the north section under moonlight, exactly where he'd buried the box 15 years ago. His past had finally caught up with him. He'd spent the morning with Eleanor and Elizabeth, showing them the structural issues in the north section, the crumbling retaining wall, the drainage problems that threatened the oldest graves. They'd taken notes, asked questions, and seemed genuinely concerned. For a brief moment, Martin had allowed himself to believe that perhaps things would be all right. Now the note didn't specify a meeting place or time, just a threat. Martin knew he couldn't ignore it. Whoever had taken these photographs had been watching him for some time. They knew about 1998, about what happened before he came to Oakwood Cemetery, about why he'd fled his previous life. As dusk settled over the cemetery, Martin made his decision. He would dig up the box himself. Whatever happened next, he needed to face it on his own terms. The north section was shrouded in shadows when Martin arrived with his shovel. The ancient oaks cast long, spectral fingers across the ground. He knew the exact spot, 3 paces from the unmarked stone, beneath the roots of a lightning-struck elm. He'd chosen it carefully all those years ago, a place unlikely to be disturbed. I wondered if you'd come. Martin spun around. Richard Blackwood emerged from behind mausoleum, his expensive coat incongruous among the weathered headstones. You sent the note, Martin said. It wasn't a question. Not personally. I have people who handle such matters. Richard stepped closer. But yes, I orchestrated it. I've been watching you for months, Martin. Ever since you started interfering with my plans. Your development plans. My legacy, Richard corrected. This cemetery is dying, just like everything else in this town. I'm trying to save it, modernize it, by destroying its history. Richard's laugh was hollow. History is for the dead. I'm concerned with the future. He gestured toward the spot where Martin had been about to dig. What's buried there, Martin? What secret from 1998 are you hiding? Martin tightened his grip on the shovel. Nothing that concerns you. Everything about this cemetery concerns me. My family built this place, and mine have tended it for generations, Martin countered. My grandfather was gravedigger here, and his father before him. Yet you abandoned that legacy for 15 years. Why? What happened in 1998 that made Martin Graves disappear and reappear as Martin Shaw? Richard smiled at Martin's surprise. Yes, I know who you really are. It wasn't difficult to discover once I started looking. Martin felt the weight of his past pressing down on him. What do you want, Richard? A simple transaction. You resign permanently. Sign over your cottage to the cemetery board. Leave Oakwood and never return. In exchange, whatever you buried here stays buried, and your true identity remains our secret. The night air grew colder as Martin considered his options. He could leave, start over somewhere else as he had before. But he was tired of running, tired of secrets. And if I refuse? Richard's expression hardened. Then I call the police. I tell them about a suspicious man who changed his identity and buried something in the dead of night in my cemetery. I'm sure they'd be very interested in digging it up. Martin took a deep breath. Go ahead. Excuse me. Call them, Martin said, his voice steadier than he felt. In fact, I'll dig it up right now, and we can both see what's inside. Richard's confidence faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? Martin began to dig, each thrust of the shovel into the earth deliberate and precise. You know, Richard, there's something about tending graves that teaches you about secrets. Everyone has them, even you. The sound of footsteps made them both turn. Eleanor Blackwood emerged from the darkness, followed by Elizabeth Harmon and Margaret from the board. Behind them came 2 police officers. What's going on here? One of the officers asked. Richard recovered quickly. Officers, I'm glad you're here. This man is trespassing and destroying cemetery property. That's not what it looks like to me, Eleanor said calmly. It appears my brother-in-law is threatening our cemetery caretaker. We heard everything, Richard, Elizabeth added. Your blackmail attempt, your threats. Richard's face contorted with rage. You don't understand. He's hiding something. He buried something here years ago. Martin continued digging, the shovel finally striking something solid. He knelt down and pulled a small metal box from the earth. all eyes fixed on it as he brushed away the dirt. "Open it," Richard demanded. Martin looked at the box, then at the faces surrounding him. "This box contains the reason I left my old life behind. The reason I changed my name from Graves to Shaw." He opened the lid. Inside lay a tarnished badge, a folded newspaper clipping, and a photograph of a young woman. "I was a police detective," Martin said quietly. "In 1998, I was investigating a series of deaths connected to a powerful family. Young women who died mysteriously after threatening to expose corruption." He handed the newspaper clipping to one of the officers. "The official ruling was suicide in each case." "I knew better." The officer read the headline, "Detective Missing After Corruption Allegations." "They tried to kill me," Martin continued. "When they failed, I ran. Changed my name. Found this place where I could disappear. What does this have to do with anything?" Richard demanded. Martin turned to face him directly. "The family I was investigating was yours, Richard. Your father's company. The young women worked at your factories. And one of them," he held up the photograph, "was my sister." A heavy silence fell over the cemetery. The officers exchanged glances. "This is absurd," Richard sputtered. "Ancient history and proven allegations, perhaps," Eleanor said. "But combined with these," she held up a folder, "your recent financial records showing massive debt and desperate need for the development money. I think the board will find it very interesting." Richard looked from face to face, realizing he was cornered. "You can't prove anything." "We don't need to prove the past," Martin said. "Your present actions speak for themselves." Richard lunged suddenly, grabbing for the box. Martin stepped back, and Richard stumbled, falling against the open grave. For a terrible moment, he teetered on the edge, his eyes wide with fear. Martin had a split-second choice: reach out to save the man who had tried to destroy him, or let him fall. Martin reached out instinctively, his hand grasping Richard's arm just as the man began to fall. Their eyes met in that suspended moment. Richard's filled with shock and fear, Martin's with a determination that transcended years of buried resentment. "I'm not like you," Martin grunted, straining against Richard's weight. With a powerful heave, he pulled the man back from the edge of the grave. Richard collapsed onto the damp earth, breathing heavily. The cemetery fell silent except for the distant rustle of leaves and the soft patter of rain beginning to fall. "You saved me," Richard whispered, disbelief coloring his voice. "Not for your sake," Martin replied, his voice steady. "Some debts can't be paid by more death." The officers moved forward, one helping Richard to his feet while the other examined the contents of the metal box. "Sir," the second officer said, studying the badge and newspaper clippings, "I think we need to take this evidence back to the station. These allegations are serious." Richard's composure crumbled. The powerful businessman who had threatened and manipulated now looked small, his expensive suit muddied, his carefully constructed facade shattered. "You don't understand," he pleaded, looking from face to face. "My father built everything we have. I couldn't let it all fall apart. The development was our last chance." "At what cost, Richard?" Eleanor asked, her voice gentle but firm. "More secrets. More lives destroyed." Richard's shoulders slumped. "The company was already failing when my father died. The debts, the lawsuits we settled quietly. I've been holding it together with smoke and mirrors for years. And blackmail," Elizabeth added. "And threats." The rain fell harder now, soaking them all, washing away the dirt from the metal box that had held Martin's secrets for so long. "I'll need statements from everyone," the first officer said. "And Mr. Blackwood, you'll need to come with us to answer some questions about these allegations and your recent actions." Richard nodded, defeated. As the officer led him away, he paused beside Martin. "I never knew," he said quietly, "about your sister, about any of it. My father kept those secrets even from me." Martin said nothing, watching as Richard was escorted to the waiting police car. The blue and red lights cast eerie shadows across the gravestones. Eleanor approached Martin, sheltering under her umbrella. "You could have let him fall. Then I'd be no better than what I've been running from all these years," Martin replied. The cemetery board members gathered around him, their expressions a mixture of awe and respect. "What happens now?" Margaret asked. Martin looked down at the photograph of his sister, her smile preserved across decades. "Now the truth comes out. All of it. Whatever that means for me." "It means you don't have to hide anymore," Eleanor said. "The board has unanimously voted to keep you on as caretaker, if you'll stay." Martin glanced at the florist bouquets, still vibrant despite the rain. "I think I will. There are still stories here that need tending." As the group dispersed, Martin remained by the open grave, shovel in hand. He began to fill it in, each spadeful of earth covering not just the empty space but years of silence and fear. In the distance, the police car pulled away, taking Richard Blackwood and his crumbling empire with it. Justice had come at last. Not perfect, not complete, but enough to begin healing wounds long festered in darkness. Martin worked until dawn, restoring the cemetery to its peaceful state. When he finished, he placed one of the anonymous bouquets on the filled grave, a tribute to secrets finally laid to rest. The weeks that followed brought a gentle rhythm back to Martin's life. Each morning, he would walk the cemetery grounds with a newfound lightness in his step. The weight of decades of secrecy had lifted from his shoulders, allowing him to stand taller among the headstones he tended. The cemetery remained his sanctuary, but no longer his hiding place. Visitors would sometimes recognize him from the news stories that followed Richard Blackwood's arrest. Martin would acknowledge them with a quiet nod before returning to his work, finding comfort in the familiar tasks of trimming, weeding, and maintaining the sacred ground. Eleanor visited often, bringing coffee and conversation. The board meetings, once a source of anxiety, now felt like gatherings of allies. Martin's knowledge of the cemetery's history had become valued rather than suspicious. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves scattered across the pathways, Martin noticed something unusual by his sister's grave. A small, intricately carved wooden box sat beside the headstone. Inside lay a tarnished locket containing a faded photograph of two children, his sister and himself, that he had never seen before. There was no explanation. Martin scanned the cemetery, but saw no one. As he closed the box, his fingers brushed against an engraving on its underside, initials and a date from before he was born. Someone else knew his family story. Someone who had been watching from the shadows all along. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed this mysterious tale. Share your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think left the wooden box?